Welcome back to Fraudology. Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. She is someone that I have known a very long time in my career. Has worked for some very impressive and well-known companies across the industries, right? From e-commerce to fintech, compliance, banking. Very smart and very experienced risk leader in the space. I have with me Tal Yeshanov, and I am just so excited that this worked out. So, Tal, thank you so much for joining me on Fraudology.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a longtime listener, longtime follower, and so I feel very honored and very excited to be here today.
Well, I feel honored to have you. You are, very in demand in a lot of ways. Your expertise is often leaned on for, in startups and with, a lot of different companies. So I think that I know that my listeners will learn a lot from you today and from our conversation. So I'm going to start with, I warned you ahead of time. I'm going to start with the same question that I ask everyone because the answer is always different. How did you get started in online fraud prevention?
So completely by accident.
Mm-hmm.
I went and worked at Google at the time. Google owned YouTube. And I know multiple languages. And so I was actually hired for my language skills because they had the challenge of figuring out how to monetize content. YouTube, almost 20 years ago, had hours uploaded every 1 minute. You can imagine how much, and now it's even just
my gosh.
more. And so they had a classification issue where they needed language experts to help them tag data and videos, read the metadata, and listen. So read and listen to videos. And so I was lucky that I had analytical skills and language skills and could work very well with engineers and product managers. And so out of college, I went and worked at YouTube. And a lot of the work I did with classification and rule systems and machine learning and AI, but it wasn't called AI 20 years ago or whatever.
Right.
But the machine learning modeling, all of that ended up translating really well into risk and fraud and rule systems. And so from there, I went on to Eventbrite before its IPO, where it was a really small company. And I worked on building the rules in a two-sided marketplace. One of
the first two-sided marketplaces, honestly.
Yeah, and so it was totally by accident, but that's how I found out that I really like risk. And so that with risk, chargebacks, payment processing, all of that. And then it turned out to be an international company. So got a lot of exposure there, went on to other companies and so forth.
I think that was the first time we met, was when you were at Eventbrite. I was down in San Francisco for a merchant meetup that I think Eventbrite was hosting. And Eventbrite was like this small, scrappy startup that not many people had heard of, that was in like an old industrial building in like San Francisco in a weird part of the neighborhood. I remember.
That's right.
I remember Robert Capps being like, "I will be walking you to your hotel." And I was like, "I'll be fine." He's like, "No."
Yep.
But that, so I mean, that shows I've known you a little while. But yeah, and then Eventbrite grew, and then after Eventbrite, I think I know what was next. But where did you go once you did all of that at Eventbrite?
I went and worked at a small startup, didn't succeed, and ultimately after that, I went to work at Uber. For Uber, it was 2016. It was still in its infancy, but it was starting its hockey stick growth. And I had targeted wanting to work at Uber because at that time, it was already doing real-time machine learning modeling, and it was already a global company. And I knew that if I wanted to do risk at scale and in an automated way, that I needed to go work at like the best of the best in terms of, like the challenge of having to build systems from scratch. And so like Uber was like my goal company to work for. And It was challenging, but I learned a lot.
Yeah. At every company that you've worked at, I think you have built the system without any playbook, right? Because they've been new business models. I mean, Uber really changed the game for the gig economy. It changed the game for a lot of online companies and apps.
That's
There's a lot of companies that were built off of it, not just Lyft, but food delivery and so many other things were built because Uber succeeded. And you were able to build, an Eventbrite too. And, everywhere else, like you were really at the beginning and built something for a business model that didn't exist, a super risky business model that didn't exist and that no one thought would succeed.
yeah.
I remember at the same trip that I went to see you, I also visited the guys at Square, and they were also in a really small, that was a really small office, but it was like industrial too, in a weird part of town, and it was way before they moved into their fancy, their fancy headquarters that they share with Uber. And I remember telling the guys that work there, like, why would you take this job? I can't imagine it being successful. Like, it sounds so risky, right? Like, everything in my body, like, from a fraud perspective, says that's all you're going to get. Like, who's going to, and I had been at a payment processor, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff that like you guys aren't doing that you have to do. And they're like, no, we don't anymore. And so that was a very pivotal time in my career because I got to work with so many of you at that stage where you guys were figuring it out and learning how to use big data in really cool ways to pinpoint risk. It was a really exciting time in fraud and technology.
It really was. Yeah, San Francisco, especially in
Yeah.
the early 2010s, even 2020
Mhm.
onwards, San Francisco is always just kind of filled with interesting people, talent, ideas,
Mhm.
thoughts, technologies. I mean, even now with the AI bubble, well, sorry, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say bubble, even with the AI world,
Yeah.
um, there's so much coming out of San Francisco. And it's a lot of fun to build and
Mhm.
take on ideas that might otherwise seem like they're crazy ideas that might not succeed, but you put the right talent and you put the right data and you create the right software and create a
Mhm.
product that customers enjoy and of course have the right controls in
Yes.
for risk and fraud in place and things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, very exciting things. So, talking a little bit about that time, I mean, we're really focused on, you know, single points of data. I mean, because that's all we had, right? But AI really just changes. I mean, you mentioned AI, it changes how decisions are made, right? Because it opens up the world to so much more information. And the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. Um, I'd love for you to talk a bit about like what things used to be compared to where we're at now from a risk perspective, whether it's transaction monitoring, account, security, all of those, different points of risk management.
Yeah, so I think what used to be was we had rule systems that then adopted into modeling, and rules and models were used together. We
Mm-hmm.
had multiple point solutions. So we would get data from device vendors and phone vendors and IP vendors and email vendors. And
Mm-hmm.
then we would take all that data and create those rules and models. And sometimes those rules and models were static. It required a lot of involvement from IT and engineering teams, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
security and legal teams. And then the output would be something that an analyst would need to review to decide if the model or the rule made the right decision. Sometimes
Mm.
there were automated decisioning depending on what the company was doing and what
Yeah.
kind of risk threshold they could take. So I'll put that little asterisk in there. But manual reviews were definitely something companies had to think about. And a lot of times, too, companies would use outdated SOPs, or there would be tribal knowledge where somebody would know a bunch of stuff and then they would leave and you no longer know what to do. What
Yeah.
I'm seeing right now is a really big shift to using
Mhm.
AI, where a lot of the times those rule and model systems and those multiple point solutions can be unified into like an orchestration platform where you can look at different points of how the user is interacting with your
Mm.
website or your app. So what used to be a rule that existed on just a transaction could now be a system or a workflow that is
Mhm.
being orchestrated across the entire life cycle. And you could have workflows work alongside humans, right?
Mhm.
We're talking so much about AI replacing humans. I don't think it's a replacement. I think it's working alongside
Mhm.
to ensure that there's AI assisted investigations so that the analysts can be more productive and can also do their job without having to rely on engineers or product
Mm.
managers, because now we have zero code agility, we have
Mm.
rapid deployment, we have agentic AI opportunities where we can improve our day-to-day operations. And so that allows companies to be a lot more flexible and creative
Mm.
in finding and responding to fraud.
Right. Yeah, it used to be like a snapshot at the time of transaction, right? Like, what's the device they're using at the time of transaction? What's their IP? What's the the payment information? Did AVS and CVV match? Like, those type of things. Now, as you're saying, you can track how they entered your website. You can track, how they're interacting with it. Did they go straight to a product or did they click around a little bit? What size their screen is, how they're holding it. I mean, you can get
I think
really,
all
really
that stuff.
detailed. Yeah. And then also like the entire, what they did when they were on the website, and a lot of risk signals can be picked up from that.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing that I've found with a lot of companies that switch from just the transaction monitoring piece to a more holistic view, as you're talking about, where you're looking at the entire customer journey, is a lot of times when they first switch over, they'll see a pattern of fraudsters using their own device and their own IP when they
That's
enter
right.
the website, because they just assume that they have transaction monitoring still. And then they switch right before the transaction. Then they're like, oh, I have to, look all perfect for my picture, basically. And they, get a SOX 5 proxy, and they, change their device, and they do all this stuff to look good there. And when you can see the whole thing, you're like, oh, yeah, you're totally fraudulent, because you're doing not a regular customer wouldn't sign into the VPN just to make a transaction. If they were using a VPN, they would have used it from the beginning. So it's just little things like that. I think it's so important for everybody to go upstream and start collecting a lot of those data points. And it
Absolutely.
like you said, it, provides so much more data. And the more data and information we have, the more precise decisions we can make. And that's always been the holy grail in fraud, is, approving the right sales and, declining the bad one.
That's absolutely right. I remember one time I was leading an investigation on what we could do to find more signals, because I
Mm.
was lucky enough to be at a company that had feature engineering capabilities where the
Mm.
analysts could talk to the engineers to design features
Wow.
that could then be built into rules and models. And so a feature that I had recommended for an engineer to build was, I noticed that when users were sharing things with their friends from a feature in the app, then they were never fraudsters, because of course
Ah,
fraudsters don't socially share
right.
anything with anyone. And so it was almost, and we actually ended up using that feature that we engineered in our
Mhm.
chargeback representment strategy, because
Mm.
we knew that customers were lying because they did make the transaction, and we could confirm they made the transaction because we knew that they had shared what, I don't remember exactly what that piece was, but we knew that they had shared that piece
They
so
told their friends
so
about
they were
it.
a legitimate user.
Yeah.
And so that's like a non-risk signal that
Yeah.
ended up being used in our risk models.
Mm-hmm. I love stories like that because there's so many like it. Yeah, it also helps you be able to identify the good guys, right? And um, you can give them the faster happy path uh, than the ones that are a little more risky. If they're sharing their they're sharing whatever they bought with their friends, or they're sharing it on social media, the trip that they're taking or whatever it is, like that can be a good. Now, granted, like it kind of reminds me of gift cards, back in the day. A very easy risk signal on gift cards was if they even filled out a gift, like a note, right, for the digital gift cards to go to the email.
Yeah.
Or if it was like how short it was, right? Like that was such a risk signal for us for so long. And then fraudsters figured it out. And then I started like writing these big, long, like 3-sentence things. But I mean, eventually they'll adapt, but for a while they work well.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just as important to find your legitimate users as it is to find your fraudsters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of the times that's also missed in conversations from my experience is people are so focused on finding the fraud,
Yes.
which is absolutely important, but it's not the full picture. You have to think about the false positives as well, because if you're making a decision by only thinking about the fraudsters, you're going to harm good users, lose trust, and turn away revenue. And so you absolutely want to have a holistic approach. And I think that's what AI is allowing us to do right now, is having that holistic approach by looking at so many more data points that before you couldn't really see all those data points. And now you have a lot more capability to see those data points and create agents, workflows, operating procedures to take action.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, there's definitely kinks to be worked out, and it depends on, how you're using AI and what you're using it for, and, the partners that you work with and all of that, because really the sky's the limit. But I mean, especially because you in your career have always been on the forefront of the technology piece because you had to work with so many engineers and product people for companies that had those resources. I think that you're 100% right that that's where we're headed, and that's where the biggest companies are doing now. And I think a lot of other companies are in the process of catching up in different ways, whether that means augmenting their current system or changing it altogether. There's a lot of conversations around those things.
Yeah, I wish I had AI in prior roles, prior companies.
um, when when does AI fit for like ops and AI agents? Like, you know, sometimes it doesn't, right? But where does it fit?
Yeah, so I think it depends what problem you're solving for. And different problems require different types of AI uses. And so I have used AI to connect Claude to our company's database
Mm.
so that I could query the company's database with by just asking Claude questions. Whereas in the past, what I would have to do as an analyst is I would have to write SQL queries
Mm-hmm.
to ask the questions and get the data and make the decisions that I needed to make based off of the queries I wrote. If the queries I wrote weren't correct or had a bug or I didn't ask the right query question, of course I would get a bad output. With AI, you can do all that so much faster. And so that right now is my favorite use case for AI. Is not every company can connect Claude to their database, but if you can, that's incredibly powerful. Another thing that I've seen work really well is risk teams always need to work closely with customer support teams because risk is in many cases taking adverse actions against customers. And those customers have questions about why actions were taken or why certain onboarding has to happen or why certain pieces of data needs to be collected. or why they were locked out, right? Whatever it is. So in certain cases, the amount of questions becomes so big, and you can't staff your support teams to grow in line with your customer support queries. You need to find a way to scale and automate how you respond to your customers. And so one of the things I did at a prior company was use AI to go through it and read all of our operating procedures and answer simple questions that already existed in our documentation.
Oh, wow.
Things that were either published online or were not published online, so that users could know when they're getting their payout. Or if they were locked out, who do they need to contact? Or if they're being asked for this documentation, what is required within that documentation? So that was a really good way for the risk team and the customer support team to be able to quickly respond to customer concerns. But again, it didn't completely take the human out of the equation. People still needed to audit the work that the AI agent responded and create the actual substance behind the answers for the AI workflow to read. And then finally, the third really cool use case that I've seen work very well is in companies where there's a lot of escalations and a lot of competing priorities, you can use AI to scan everything that your company is working through and give you an analysis of all the open items and triage which items might be the higher priority items so that you can respond appropriately. Again, you can use it in a lot of creative ways, and it doesn't replace humans. It just allows people to be a lot more creative in the questions they're asking and the solutions they offer so that they can be more efficient in their workflows.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And those are some really cool ways that companies and people, I know other merchants are doing, dashboards created by, Claude or, whatever GPT they're using, whether it's OpenAI or whatever else. There's also, a few vendors popping up that, provide AI agents to actually, do manual review, to review things.
Absolutely.
That's, I know, a newer technology that's coming out that people are looking at as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's really impactful. And we will see better customer experiences. And I think we will also see improved revenue outcomes for companies that can adopt this technology the right way. We can't just kind of take the software and apply it. You have to customize it. One size approach does not fit all. But I think that taking that kind of solutioning is going to allow companies to be very successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen some really cool, ways that a couple different vendors are implementing AI agents to not do the job of a human, but to enhance the ability of the human to do more. And, maybe it increases their manual review rate. Maybe it increases their ability to analyze more data. Maybe it, allows them to take on more tasks or more responsibilities because they're not doing, they're not pulling end of month reporting anymore. There's just so many different things that I think it's really, it's fascinating. It's moving very fast, and that can be a little overwhelming sometimes. But I think it's also very fascinating how different companies are using it.
I think so too. Yeah, I think what most people miss in this AI conversation is that AI is only solving half of the risk operations problem. It's all about how it's used, right? And so every company can build those really powerful AI agents. And you're seeing that, and I'm a big proponent of it. But you have to have that structured understanding of what the risk is. And so the most successful implementations that I've seen are able to use the institutional knowledge that already exists at the company. So all the tribal knowledge that gets lost if someone's leaving or if someone's kind of just doing their own reviews and isn't sharing it out with the rest of their team. I think AI can really help create like a competitive advantage if it's used in a way that in a creative way where teams are able to organize the data and then use it, and it's all about knowledge.
Right. Yeah. I think, maximizing on that tribal knowledge, on the domain expertise is so important, because you're right. If it's a copy paste situation where, oh, this worked for company A, it's going to work for company B, you're not going to be as precise, and you're not going to be able to, you're going to have a lot of false positives, to your point earlier.
That's true.
Because, risk is going to look like, good orders will look risky.
Correct. And I think the hard part is, like, you can't just say, oh, there's a device mismatch, it's fraud, or velocity means, high velocity of orders means fraud, or IP is risky, so it's fraud. Each signal is a piece of the pie, but the goal isn't just diagnosing by just taking individual attributes. The goal is about, and it's not about scoring, right? Rule systems would score, model systems would score. It's not just scoring. You want to really understand how everything comes together so that you can create a holistic response to things. I can tell you, early in my career, I worked at a company where I wrote a rule, and the rule that I wrote was incredibly effective. It had all of the right signals and all the signals combined together caught the fraudsters that I was trying to catch. And so I was very proud of this rule, but it failed me. And if I knew what I know now about AI, and I could have used AI then, I wouldn't have failed. And so this particular rule was trying to look for triangulation fraud. And without going into too much detail about what triangulation fraud is, it was looking for a certain type of behavior where a fraudster was trying to resell a legitimate product. And these fraudsters were able to commit this triangulation fraud all over the world. And so because of the nature of the fraud, I had written a rule that was looking to see if a human was teleporting by looking at an equation of speed and distance, and can a human be in two locations at once. The rule I had written was looking to see the velocity of the orders, and it looked to find situations where there was abnormal behavior. And so this particular rule got hit because this user ended up placing an order in LA and then another order in Asia, 5 minutes apart.
Wow. Which is impossible for one person to be in both places at once.
I know. Unless you're Superman
Usually.
And then you can fly.
Right.
But my rule assumed Superman wasn't purchasing the item.
Right.
So my rule worked effectively. It caught this exact behavior. But 11 p.m., I'm trying to get to bed. I get an email. My phone's going off. I get phone calls. I get texts. I'm not understanding what's happening. I log on to my corporate email account, and I realized that an executive at the company I had worked at wasn't able to use the product because that particular rule had hit his account. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. So this rule that I was incredibly proud of, I was no longer proud of for that moment. Point being, I had done all the right things, and I looked at all the right signals: device, velocity, IP, luxury goods, everything. And so even though this rule had a good hit rate, what I had learned is that in this particular case, this executive who was trying to use his card could not, because his girlfriend had used his credit card in LA. And so he was a false positive. The rule hitting him was a false positive. And so that's why I failed in that scenario.
Right.
Luckily, this executive appreciated rule systems and appreciated the work and appreciated that the rule was behaving how it should have. But if I could have rewritten that rule in today's time, I would have looked at so much more than just the signals that I had at the time of transaction. I would have looked to see
Mm-hmm.
if multiple devices had used this particular credit card. I would have looked to see how long this user had been on the platform, what they were doing
Yeah.
immediately before they had placed the transaction. What I would have looked at the 2 devices that were operating. I would have looked at so many more factors
Mm-hmm.
and not just at the transaction details.
Yeah.
And so AI is really powerful in that sense because you could do so much with it, so much more with it.
Right. It can do more than we can do on our own, right? Because it's able to look, at a 10,000-foot view instead of a 1,000-foot view, so to speak.
Absolutely.
It also works a lot with account security as well. I mean, same principles, right? A lot of times, traditional rules engines or, even, machine learning or whatever it is, are looking at instead of taking a snapshot at the time of transaction, they're taking a snapshot at the time of login, right? Or account creation. But mostly, for account takeovers, we're looking at login. And same thing can be said that if you are, looking at more data and more signals from upstream in the transaction, then you're able to identify, this device has logged into a lot of different accounts.
Yeah.
Or this device has never logged into this account. Maybe we should trigger MFA, or maybe we should, trigger something else. That, but you could also look at, so many more data points, right? Like how long it takes them to do the, to log in. Are they copying and pasting? Is it autofill? Is it, are they typing it in really slowly? Like, do they type it in the same way that they typed it in last
Yep.
time? There's a lot of really unique things that you can do. So I just wanted to touch on account security as well, because I know so many merchants are dealing with that right now, and banks as well. Account takeovers, I don't think they're ever truly going to go away. Maybe until, we get really good at AI and can surgically remove them. But there are definitely a lot of, there are more solutions for it now than there ever have been.
Absolutely. And I think the thing too with account security that's interesting is we're seeing that fraud behaviors aren't just happening just at the transaction level, right? Account security could
Mm-hmm.
impact compliance and regulations and credit decisioning and
Mm.
identity verification. And so when account security isn't set up correctly, what that means is a fraudster can take over an existing account, but then use additional synthetic identities or credit information or
Mm-hmm.
payout schemes and layer that on with other types of fraudulent behaviors. So what
Mm-hmm.
I would see earlier in my career is that you would have just account security issues and account takeover. And it was just an account takeover issue. Someone would get
Yeah.
access to an account, move the payout or move the money or make a transaction on a credit card that existed on the account, whatever it was. They would just do that one fraudulent behavior. But
Mm-hmm.
now, because the companies that we have are more interesting and nuanced, right? You have buy now, pay later. You have
Mm.
two-sided and three-sided marketplaces. You
Mm-hmm.
have lending products. You have so many different types of like fintech companies. Oh, and even just the fintech dynamics of like having multiple
Oh, yeah.
layered approaches between who the customer is and the merchant and the fintech and the sponsor bank. Anyways, I digress. The issue is that now account takeover isn't just an account takeover issue. It's an
Mm.
issue that spans more than just account takeover, where it impacts so many other types of business lines or creates potentials for losses across different types of behaviors.
Right. You're absolutely right. I think a couple of years ago we started to see hybrid or kind of these zombie fraud MOs where like it was a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's like it's a hybrid of, card testing and account takeover, or, triangulation fraud and, something else, right? and they don't know what we call it, and they don't know like what, oh, this department's in charge of that part and this department's in charge of that part. Like they don't care. Because I mean the truth is we've been talking about, the just the advent of AI and the speed of it, growing and improving and how much it helps us on the fraud side, but on the fraud prevention side. But the truth is, fraudsters have the same technology and they're doing all kinds of cool stuff too with this technology to be able to identify vulnerabilities easier and be able to exploit those vulnerabilities at record speed. So it's like both sides of this battle are need to step up and engage with today's technology because the other side is going to.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying because it's just absolutely true. I'm sure you're seeing fraudsters, use and utilize AI and adapting to, whatever fraud technology merchants and fintechs and banks have. How are you seeing them utilizing AI in that way?
So I'm seeing that fraudsters can now bypass some identity verification software, which
Mm-hmm.
is really scary because you used to think like, oh, ask a user to turn their head up and down sideways or have them upload their driver's license and then the metadata of the barcode is scanned and this is
Mm-hmm.
foolproof. But now fraudsters are actually able to get through and
Mm-hmm.
set up accounts. And that's incredibly scary because the company thinks that they're giving a legitimate user an account. And in scenarios where it's a company that has businesses or is a fintech and money is moving, you don't want to be allowing a fraudster to transact because then they're laundering money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one challenge that I see, and I don't think the industry has solved it yet, is of course they care about solving money laundering, but money laundering doesn't cause them financial losses.
Yep.
And so product leaders who care about revenue and care about user experience,
Mm-hmm.
um, they product managers will sometimes win in those conversations. And so the fraudsters actually can succeed because that
Mm-hmm.
investment from companies to improve the onboarding, the KYC, the KYB, the compliance infrastructure isn't really a top priority for every company.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is one of the scariest things because I think the industry just hasn't, one, solved for the issue, and two, the problem isn't a financial problem today until regulators come and regulate, of course, money laundering and
Mm-hmm.
regulatory issues. But to me, that's that feels like a really big problem.
Hmm. I was just talking today with a very large retailer in the US, um, and was catching up with their fraud leader, and they had been added a lot more responsibilities and purview in their role back in February. And so I was asking them, how that was going, and their first response was, "Well, I'm breathing." I was like, "Oh yeah, I've been there before." But one of the things that they were responsible for is reselling. And a lot of times, this is on the merchant side primarily, where if there are goods and services that can be resold, it's not necessarily triangulation fraud because there's not a stolen payment method involved. It's, for instance, I worked with a merchant once in my consultancy that had a brand that had been around for years, but got recent uptick with Gen Z. And all of a sudden their sales just went through the roof. Well, so did their chargebacks. Because a lot of fraudsters want to be able to sell their products were going for higher on the secondary market than they were the primary market. So, a lot of people wanted to buy the products from the company and then resell them on two-sided marketplaces. They also had issues with pricing because while they were global, they had very different pricing structures for items and different inventory in different locations. So, the US may have some inventory that, Asia doesn't have and vice versa. And, same with EU or whatever. And then the other thing was pricing, where the product was much cheaper in North America, whether it was the US or Canada, than it was in Asia. It was significantly more expensive in Asia. So you saw all of these entrepreneurial people popping up to become resellers, to simply make purchases on the website in the US or Canada, receive them, and then, oh, I have a cousin in China I can send this to, or, they'd find a business contact online or whatever it was. And so that made their sales go through the roof. And at first, when we talked to the business and said, hey, we identified a reseller problem, what would you like to do about it? They were like, oh, yeah, we don't want resellers because it dilutes the brand and it's, kind of corporate arbitrage and just all these different things. We don't want them. Okay. When we provided them with a number, with the percentage of sales that would drop if we did anything about these resellers, because while they're not using stolen credit cards, they are, impacting the brand. They were doing a lot of sneaky stuff with gift cards to try to get around, rules and stuff like that. Just for the sake of the story, say that we said 25% of your sales will be gone tomorrow if we shut down resellers. We just want to make sure you're okay with that. They might pop up in other areas of the company. They might pop up in Europe. They might pop up in China, but in the North America region, which you're only responsible for, just so you know, this is going to happen. And then it was a very different conversation, as you said.
Right.
Where product is wait. I mean, it's not really fraud, right? We're not getting chargebacks for this. I think we're good with it, even though it was wrecking their inventory. It was, really impacting their good customers because resellers were, putting bots on the website to try
the good customers weren't getting it.
Yep. The good customers weren't getting it. It was the customers in other parts of the world that were getting it. And also, as I tried to explain to this company, they were losing out on a lot of money because, if the people in China just were able to buy, if that product was a little cheaper in China, there wouldn't be this need for all of this international shipping and all this other stuff. If you just made your prices a little more cohesive, obviously taking different things into effect, the exchange rate and things like that. But if you made them comparable, then you wouldn't have this problem either. And because they were managed by different teams, there was a completely different org for North America than there was for Europe, than there was for Asia. They were North America was my client. And they're like, no, we don't want to give those, we don't want to tell that to China and have them, we don't want to lose those sales. So anyway, that's a side story to explain this merchant I was talking to today. They're having a massive reseller problem. And they're running up against the same thing. And it was, they sell some very popular products that can be resold on the secondary market for more. That they're noticing just this huge uptick in, and it's not fraud, but it's abuse, right? It's impacting the good customers, especially when they have drops of new products. They're not the ones being able to do it. It's similar to what happened in the ticketing industry, or what has happened in the ticketing industry.
Yeah, we saw that a lot when I was at Eventbrite.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting on something incredibly important, is that a lot of teams focus on fraud.
Yeah.
And a lot of roles are open as fraud roles.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're seeing in the industry is that whether it's fraud or abuse, I'm seeing that a lot more companies are adopting the term of risk teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all encompassing, right? Whether it's fraud or account takeover or abuse or transaction fraud or first party fraud or scams or I don't know, B2B credit underwriting that was done wrong because of false information, whatever it is, collections, right? Because the fraudster didn't use the right, I don't know, whatever. There's so many different flavors of risk.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is that now this world is becoming, to your point, the fraudsters don't care what we call it, but they're finding different ways to steal money and to
Yes.
steal identities. And at the end of the day, it's impacting companies and users in a negative way. And so what gets lost a lot in translation between teams is that, oh, well, I'm not responsible for it, or it doesn't hit my P&L, or, marketing cares about getting users. Product
Yeah.
cares about getting users. They don't necessarily care about stopping fraud.
Keeping money at the end of the day.
Right. And so I think that's a really big challenge. And you hit the nail on the head with that example, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was like a today example, right? And she's just buried in all of this stuff. And it's like, this problem was created. And then she's also in charge of claims, claiming that an item didn't make it, or claiming that, the product was broken. And they recently had a new type of product that they're selling on their website. And they did an analysis because they started noticing a pattern, like, we're getting a lot of claims for this new product. It's a product we've never sold before, under our brand. Like, we've never, but we're getting a lot of claims. Is there something wrong with the product? And as they dove deeper, it was, good users with their own credit cards that were saying, hey, I didn't get it when they did, so they could keep the product and then get their money back.
Right.
And so that's also growing on the retail side significantly. And yeah, that's a huge risk, but it's not fraud. I think that's also why we're seeing, when we have for a long time, like for at least 10 years in marketplaces, calling it trust and safety versus, fraud. Because, and sometimes that involves content moderation as well. Sometimes it doesn't, but, really trying to protect the safety of the users and spinning it where this is a positive thing. We're building trust and we're keeping you safe.
Yeah, agree.
So a couple more things. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your fraud leadership philosophy. Like, not only have you had, some really good opportunities to, hone your skills as a leader. I happen to know that a lot of people that, used to have reported to you in the past still frequently reach out to you with questions and asking for advice. And I think that's the sign of a really good leader. Because a lot of times people leave their jobs, or their leader leaves the company and they don't really keep in touch anymore. So I'd love to ask you more about like your philosophy around fraud leadership, and what you a little wisdom you could, give to other people that are in similar positions.
Wow. It's a cool question. Yeah. So I just love people.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Other than fraudsters.
minus sponsors, but
Right.
and I just happen to be very lucky that I'm in a space where a lot of the people in our industry are just amazing people that are
Yes.
curious and ambitious and very driven. So I've been very lucky that I've had amazing teams. And I've been able to connect with a lot of the folks that report up to me. And so one of the things that I really value when I'm trying to be a good leader, and in leaders that I think are good leaders to me, is transparency and empathy. And I think those two things go very well together. I think you need to be very transparent in what you expect of people, what you communicate to people, why you make the decisions you make, especially people that are, hardworking and care about their jobs, which so many of our peers really love this industry and love their work. And then that transparency, I think, leads to really good relationships. And that's kind of where the empathy component comes in for me. Is I really, really try to connect with people on a basic human level. Right? We all want to do a good job, but sometimes things happen and you can't really understand or have real conversations with people if you don't know what's happening with them, if you don't know their goals, their aspirations, the hardships they're going through, where they want their career to go, or why they have or haven't been able to do what they're trying to do. And so I feel like because I've had the opportunity to be transparent and empathetic with my teams, I have received that back. And it's allowed us to create really genuine relationships that, yeah, fast forward 5, 10, 15 years, I'm still in touch with a lot of my peers and a lot of the folks that reported to me, as well as some managers that I've reported to. And so I love this industry so much. I feel very lucky.
I get it. I do too. I really feel grateful that I also fell into it by accident. I think most of us at, our level and length of time in the industry did fall into it by accident in various ways. But I consider myself so grateful that I'm in an industry where that doesn't stay stagnant and that continues to grow and change. Just like we were talking about, right? Like the changes that have happened in the last like 5, even 2 years, are monumental. And I love stretching my brain and learning about new technology and how to apply it. But also, just to have a career. I mean, at the time, I was a college dropout, so that is something I'm very grateful for. But back to your point of leading with empathy and transparency, I think that goes a really long way. I think especially because those of us that are drawn to this industry have really good bullshit meters. And, that means that the people that report to you are really good at sniffing it out. And if you're not transparent with them, they're not going to respect you.
Absolutely.
And having that empathy to say, I think also being in fraud, you need to have empathy for good users, and understanding of their situations, as well as empathy for victims, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I think those are 2 skills that are really good to have if you're just in fraud in general. But I agree with you that especially in leadership, they're pretty important. And the most empathetic leaders I know of are also the ones that have a following. Like whether it's a physical following at a conference and like their past employees are still, following them around, which I have seen happen in at least one circumstance. And you're like, wait a second, you don't work with them anymore. But they're all there. Or it's, like figuratively where, when they have a question and they don't know who to ask, they reach out to you because they're going to respect your answer. And they know that you're going to be transparent and not, give a fluffy answer.
That's right. I for better or worse, I speak my mind. I have opinions.
You and I both.
I think in the risk space, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Some, I think over the years, we learn to hone that in, especially with leadership that doesn't understand fraud people or that don't understand fraud people. And don't understand that we can just be direct and, not have our feelings hurt or anything else like that. But and be direct but I think it's also a really important skill because if you're not being direct, then you're kind of talking in circles and not, when you're working with engineering and you're working with product and you're working with all these other, cross-functional teams, you need to just say what needs to be done and, maybe provide a little bit of context, but not be, beating around the bush.
Absolutely. I think being direct in some cases is a kindness. Of course, you can do it in a very polite and
of course
nice way. You don't have to be a jerk about it. But it's a kindness because then the person knows what's expected of them, where they stand, how to deliver, what's not important, what's important. And so I think folks that know how to be direct and kind are folks that get results.
That's really well said. I think the last question I want to ask you is around jobs, right? I mean, I think the scariest thing about AI, while we're excited about it for various reasons, the scariest thing about AI is, we are seeing jobs disappearing. I've seen a few companies very prematurely lay off fraud leaders and be like, Claude can do it. And like legitimately just think that Claude can fight fraud. And my response is, well, and I mean, unless you have the enterprise model and it's, got your database and everything else, even then, all of these GPT tools are running off of the internet. And a lot of this is not open source. A lot of what we know, you call it tribal knowledge, I call it domain expertise, whatever we call it, like that lives inside of our brains.
Yeah.
That's not anywhere that Claude's going to be able to access. And so I have seen some companies prematurely do that. And then within 3 months, you see their account takeovers, explode by 3 times, or you see their chargeback losses just, go up because, they're losing the leader, or they're losing, they're laying off manual reviewers or whatever it is. So AI is definitely impacting jobs. And some jobs are disappearing, and it's really hard for, it has been more difficult. I shouldn't say really hard, but it's been more difficult and challenging for people in fraud that I think are some of the smartest people in the world, like top 5% in fraud. I would say like no more than me. Like they know way more than me. They, have done this forever, like everything, like are just, it's not as easy for them to get another job. So I'm kind of seeing, that it's changing. But how are you looking at it from like a perspective of which jobs are disappearing and how fraud teams look now, and what the landscape looks like too?
Yeah. So first of all, I completely agree with you. I've definitely seen a lot of companies prematurely lay off people, and we're hearing about layoffs on an almost daily basis, and we're seeing huge layoffs, right?
Yeah.
20,
Thousands.
30% of a
Yeah.
company is getting laid off, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one, it's insane, but two, I think companies are asking the wrong question. I think the question that companies should be asking is, what work should people stop doing? And I don't think companies think about that question, because there absolutely is work that humans should stop doing, but then there's a lot of work that we should still continue to do, and it's more important now that we do it. And so the kind of work that I think we should stop doing is the repetitive work where a system can follow an operating procedure, for example. So that repetitive work, you can give that to AI. But someone has to be creative and understand the domain and bring their domain expertise to create the operating procedures, to create the workflows, to create the rules or the models or the systems. So the work that I see that's going to become incredibly important, and the jobs that are not going to be replaced, are the jobs where people have the domain expertise and are able to be creative in asking AI for the right answer. Like, so you have to prompt an agent with the right information. You have to ask the right questions, and you have to design the right system. And so the folks who can bring that creativity and can bring that domain expertise to create those systems, create those workflows, create those operating procedures, those are the people that are going to succeed. And those are the jobs that humans are going to continue doing. And AI is not going to ever be able to replace human creativity and human ingenuity, because the fraudsters are adapting, so the behaviors are adapting, the products are adapting, the features are adapting, and with it, a human has to adapt. So the human's going to feed AI, and then the AI is going to have the output. I think a lot of the times people think one size really can fit all. And I don't think that's true. And so I think that customization is going to become incredibly important. And only the folks who can focus on that customization, again, by being creative and having that domain expertise, can succeed, will succeed.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right about that. I think that's really good advice. And I think it's our job as fraud practitioners to do our best at explaining that to senior leadership
Right. I would
who are
say we have
making
to
decisions.
design our operations.
Yeah, that's a good way of, yes.
I had to say it in one sentence.
Design our operations. Yes, that's a good way. I am not surprised that this time flew by so quickly and
Really
that we
did it.
got a lot in. Yeah, I know. Well, we already had the capacity of having like a an hour long conversation and not realizing it already. So it doesn't surprise me that when recording it was the same way. But I am absolutely going to include a link to your profile in the show notes. I know that you are looking for your next opportunity, and I want to make sure that people know that so they can reach out to you with anything they want to talk about, questions, and that type of thing. And I just really appreciate your time today and your wisdom. You have a lot of good fraud wisdom.
I appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk to you and to catch up. And thank you.
Yes, no, you too. I'm so grateful. We'll have to do this again soon. I think that would be really fun. But yep, thank you again so much. And I will talk to everyone else very soon next week.